We have one final then script that I want to show you that relates to DSC, which is our build domain controller script right here. This build domain controller script is one that we can execute on another machine here in our environment to create this machine, dc.company.pri. But let me go ahead and step through this script just a bit to see what you're about to accomplish as you attempt to create a new domain controller out of really nothing at all. As before, we have this configuration data here, which includes all the specific information for the machine that we're attempting to run this document against. This node name will equal localhost, which is essentially run this on wherever you're executing this PowerShell script. We will change the computer name to DC and set the IP address to 3.10 and the gateway address to 3.2. We'll set the domain name down here to company.pri and set this as its domain distinguished name. We have a database path and a log path that we want to configure also for Active Directory once we go through its installation, as well as a sysvol path down here. And these last two items down here allow us to use the usernames and passwords that we're entering in here down at the bottom part of the script right down here. So these are the specific information bits that we're going to add here as part of our build domain controller configuration. Let me expand that configuration to show you that we have some additional modules that we need to implement. Our DNS Server Module and our networking module, as well as our Active Directory module here. These resources include all the necessary code that goes through configuring a DNS server, creating the necessary zones, going through all the networking bits, adding an Active Directory, and then all the bits there within Active Directory like users and groups and organizational units. Down here, if we expand this just a bit, we can find more information about what we're also attempting to accomplish. We've already seen the use of the new IP address, new IP gateway, and primary DNS client, as well as the user administrator keywords down here. These were going to essentially create all those different IP address configurations that we talked about just a second ago. So there's our IP address, there's our gateway address. We will, in this situation, actually use the IP address of a local machine as the location where we'll go for DNS services, because it will become a DNS server itself. We are going to make sure that the administrator password is set to whatever we configure that as part of the script here. But now we go through a couple of different items that we didn't do before. We will change the computer name here to the computer name that we've identified down there in the node information. And then we'll go through the Active Directory Domain Services install by adding in the Windows feature for Active Directory Domain Services here in line 48. We'll also go through, once we've completed that install, and do the configuration of our domain controller as well. Here is our domain name and the credential for our domain administrator, the credential for our safe mode administrator password, and all the database, log, and sysvol paths as well. These are more or less the minimum requirements to get this domain up and operational as company.pri. Once that is operational, we can then go through further configuring the domain to add in the necessary accounts that you may require. Let's say that you create an account here called My Account. My Account can be the account you would use to log in as a domain administrator. Here we actually create that account, My Account, with a given name and surname of My Account, with the password that you enter in when we first launch the script. Down here you can see we're creating other accounts for G Shields, D Jones, and J Helmick as well. We're also creating some Active Directory groups here. Here's our IT group, in which we add in the G Shields, J Helmick, and My Account usernames. We can do the same thing here for domain admins, adding in G Shields and My Account, and so on with enterprise admins and schema admins and so on. This script concludes with the very last step in the process here, which is the addition of an Active Directory reverse zone. So a zone that allows us to query for host names when all we happen to know is the IP address. All of these different configurations with the use of the depends on keyword here are ordered such that each subsequent configuration doesn't happen until the configuration prior to it completes. So you can see here that we won't actually create the reverse zone until we've gone about creating the domain controller. And the domain controller creation itself, all the way up here, will go through the necessary installation of DNS services as part of that domain controller install. So all of this presents you with just a kind of a very large example that you can then execute on a server of your choosing to create that Active Directory domain company.pri. In fact, let me go ahead and pause things here for just a minute, and I'll create another server. We'll call this Server 3 that we will rename to DC. We will configure all the things that we've shown here. We'll create an Active Directory domain controller, and then we'll go through the creation of all these users, groups, and reverse DNS zones. And then fast forwarding things once again, let's take a look at the server that I just really installed right off the DVD media. This is our third server, although it is not named Server 3. In fact, it's named the random server name that you get right after that installation. This server is in a work group. This server has a DHCP address. This server also has, as you can see here, a copy of the build domain controller scripts, the folders that exist here on the desktop that we discussed just a second ago. And in fact, I just want to show you that I've brought them up here in the ISC so you can then see indeed that we're going to install those modules and then come down here and go through the build of this domain controller with the IP addressing information, the DNS client information, and all the other bits that we've talked about here so far. The process involves two steps. First, running the first script and then running the second script. Let me begin that by coming over here to the actual PowerShell command prompt itself. And let's run the prep command. So /prep domain controller.ps1. This will go through that process of locating and then downloading the necessary resources that DSC requires, those modules, and also setting the PS gallery so that it's a trusted gallery so that we don't end up with those error messages in attempting to script the download of all of these modules. This process is functionally the same as what we did a second ago, except we're adding more modules here. I think there are 4 instead of 2. The second step then is to run the build script, which is /build domain controller.ps1, which will then go through creating the MOF file and then executing that MOF file against this computer. This process also, because we have to go through a domain controller installation as well as the changing of a computer name, will require a reboot on the part of the machine. Now, I want to show you just exactly what's going on here as we enter in the username and password for this computer. Right here, I'll punch it in for the domain. So the first of these two, this is the domain administrator password. And then secondly will be the password for the local administrator, as well as all the other user accounts that we talked about a second ago. If you later wanted to log in as either me or as my account, you would use the password you choose here in order to complete that login. So let me go ahead and punch in the password here a second time, and that should begin the process here of actually executing this document. Notice here that we're now executing the document and going through the various configurations there in the document. We're now about to be signed out because, as you saw just for a second, a reboot's required to complete the name change. Now, this process is going to take a pretty extended period of time. I think maybe about 15 or 20 minutes or so. And one caution that I should warn you as you attempt to apply this in your own environment is to recognize that that period of time actually is going to take that period of time. Sometimes these DSC scripts, and probably this one that I configured for you, are perhaps not very well engineered for speed. And there aren't really good ways when you have reboots midway through the process to figure out exactly when the script is complete. You will know when this script is complete if you've waited a long enough period of time and can validate that indeed that reverse lookup zone exists there in DNS. If you don't see it just yet, you might as well just stay logged out until the process completes. Again, sometimes upwards of 15 to 20 or more minutes for it to complete. So let me go ahead and pause things one more time. I will just literally wait for the 20 minutes, and when we come back, we'll log into this machine and see exactly what this script has accomplished. And we're back. And in fact, in addition to the 20 minutes, I think I actually went to bed, woke back up, had breakfast and coffee, and am now returning back here to this machine to take a look. Let me actually show you that as a result of our efforts here, if I go ahead and do the 3-finger salute, you can see that we now have a domain here and a domain user, this administrator user, which if I log into the machine right here, I should then be able to see all the things that are associated with the domain that we just created. Let me maximize things here and take a look there at Active Directory users and computers. Remember back to the various configuration items that we were building as we took a look in that script earlier. Here inside of Active Directory users and computers, we should see a list of a couple of new usernames that were created for myself, that my user account that you may be able or be interested in using, as well as our D Jones account right here, our J Helmick account. There's our IT security group. Indeed, it looks like our DSC script here has populated our Active Directory with the correct objects that we need it to. We do know also, if you recall, the very last item there in the script was the creation of that reverse lookup zone in DNS. And in fact, if we come down here to DNS, this is the last step in that process. And so you can kind of argue that once you see this reverse zone here, that you can be assured that that script has gone through all the different pieces that we've asked it to there in the configuration. We also have a PTR record in here which was automatically added by this machine as a result of a reboot that happened. But effectively, we've accomplished all the tasks here that the script has asked this machine to be. We are now a domain controller for the domain company.pri. Now, one important note here, again, is the fact that everything I'm showing you really has to do with just applying these configurations there onto the local machine. And so, number one, you have to be kind of careful with the scripts that you may download from the ones that are associated here with this course. Those scripts could, if you double-click them on a machine, attempt to then convert that machine or tell that machine to become a domain controller. So take care with using those scripts. More importantly also is the fact that what we've discussed here is really just the basic, bare, introductory minimum of, well, what's really in PowerShell and desired state configuration. And I'll direct your attention over to the other courses that exist, some fairly significant courses that exist here in the Pluralsight catalog, to go through the much larger conversation for the setting up of push servers and pull servers and all the security elements in between for creating a production-worthy configuration for PowerShell DSC.